Well, if you've got your Bible this morning, it's okay if you don't. It'll be on the screen. But if you do have your Bible and want to journey along, we're going to be continuing our series in the Gospel of Matthew this morning. So you can get your Bibles open to Matthew chapter 20. And we're going to continue our series called Stay Close, which is really all about learning to be a disciple of Jesus, bringing the real me, not the fake me, not the religious me, but the real me, to the real Jesus, not the Jesus of your imagination, but Jesus who he really is, bringing the real me to the real Jesus. And this morning, the title of today's sermon and the conversation that we're going to have is The Path to Greatness is Down. All right? The path to greatness is down. Learning the way of Jesus. All right? Learning the way of Jesus. And today we'll be in Matthew chapter 20, verses 17 to 34. We got to be honest, okay? All of us want to be great. We really do, right? All of us deep down want to be great. Now, some of you immediately are going to say, I do not want to be the center of attention, okay? And by greatness, what I mean is not so much, maybe you don't want to be the center of attention, but what I mean by greatness is this. All of us want to be seen, we want to be valued, and we want to be appreciated. I was laughing about this. Today is Father's Day, right? Yesterday at my house, it's common in my house when I do something that I'm really proud of, I want to be seen for it. I saw an Instagram post recently that had a dad right after he cut the grass, and this is kind of what most dads look like after they do this. Like, dun da da da. Look at what I did. And usually they stand and look at it for the next hour, right? Like, what a beauty. Look at this thing. That was me yesterday after cleaning old wood and ash out of my fireplace that I should have cleaned 4 months ago at the end of winter season. I just finally got around to doing it yesterday, and it looks so great, and I got done. And what did I do immediately? I caught myself looking at Michelle going, I just cleaned out the fireplace. Did you see it? It looks so great. Like, I wanted so bad. What is it in us that wants so bad to be seen, to be valued, to be recognized for what we do? Anybody ever done this? Any dad here like the recognition when you do something like that? All right. We make jokes about it. Dads are amazing, and later I think we'll see the embodiment of the best of what it looks like to be great in the passage that we're going to study. But the thing is, there's a desire in all of us to matter. There's a desire in all of us to live a life that makes an impact. There's a desire in all of us to be respected by people around us. And interestingly, in the passage today, the disciples are going to come to Jesus with an interesting question. And the question is, Jesus, can we be great? All right? Is it possible that we can be great? Like, can we matter? Can we be valued? Can we be respected? Like, can you see us? And in the passage we're going to be looking at, Jesus actually does not rebuke their ambition. So what he's saying is it's not bad to be ambitious. He knows that desire is in you, but what he's going to do is he's going to redirect it. And he's going to redirect it so that we might be able to answer the question, what does true greatness look like? What does it look like to be great? Because it is a desire in all of us, but for most of us, for all of us, because of our sin, our self-centeredness, the culture of self-centeredness around us, we define greatness often the wrong ways, or we let it be defined by the world around us. For instance, the big corner office suite, that you get to be in, like, that's greatness. Like, when you get to be in that office, like, you get to be in that position. Like, when I finally attain whatever it is academically, that we have such an academically driven church. And I love the community that we're in, and I love your heart and ambitious heart for that. But like, what is greatness? Is it, how many diplomas will it take to actually be great? I mean, that's kind of what the world throws at us, this system of climbing that ladder. How many times can you graduate? How many times can you be published? How many books can you read or be an author in? Or perhaps greatness, you have a vision in your head of that day that all your colleagues are standing around you, and it's the awards ceremony, and everybody's, standing up to finally recognize you for all that you've done and all that you've given. And finally, like, you're getting an award, you're getting the recognition that you've worked so hard for. Greatness this is what so often the world throws at us. Or perhaps you get your idea of greatness from a guy named Michael Scott from The Office. I don't make copies because I'm the boss, okay? And maybe in your head is this idea of positional greatness and growing in greater degrees of authority. What does greatness look like? In a world where we have all these things thrown at us, it's easy to get caught up in these ideas actually becoming our aspiration. But what Jesus is doing in this passage is he's taking the question of the disciples about, like, I want to be great, and he's redirecting. And he's redirecting, and he's basically going to say this: you want to be great? Okay. Learn to serve. If you want to be great, the path to greatness is not up, but rather down. It's not climbing the ladder as much as it is getting on your knees. You want to be great, then learn to serve. The title of today's message is The Path to Greatness is Down, all right? Learning the way of Jesus. This is what we're going to be talking about today. And I'll go ahead and kind of share the main point with you. As we open the passage, we'll see it kind of brought out as we go and teach through verse by verse. But in the kingdom of Jesus, greatness is not found in power, recognition, or control, but rather in humility, servanthood, and compassion. In the kingdom of Jesus, when God is really at the center, there was a lot of talk yesterday about kings, okay? This is not a political statement, okay, on either side of that conversation. The question, though, is when we have to recognize Jesus is king, and he came to be the center of our hearts and the center of our all. And the way of Jesus sets up for us a new framework for all of life. When we come to recognize that Jesus is the center, he is our all in all. He is the one who deserves our hearts and our hopes and our allegiance. When we submit ourselves to him, everything else in our life begins to change, the framework for everything else. And this is what we call his kingdom. And it's an upside-down kingdom. He's actually restoring everything to be the way it was originally designed to be, the way that sin messed it all up. He's come to restore it and to bring it all back. But in the way of God's original design, greatness is not, it's not about power, it's not about recognition, it's not about control. Rather, it's about humility, it's about servanthood, and it's about compassion. If you want to really learn to follow Jesus, you got to learn to follow him his way. So Matthew chapter 20, starting in verse 17, and I read from the ESV. It says, "And as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside, and on the way he said to them, 'See, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. And he will be raised on the third day.' Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, "What do you want?" And she said to him, "Say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your kingdom." Jesus answered, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" And they said to him, "We are able." He said to them, "You will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." Well, when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. But Jesus called to them and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." And as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed him. And behold, there were two blind men sitting by the roadside, and when they had heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd rebuked them, telling them to be silent, but they cried out all the more, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." And stopping, Jesus called them and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." And Jesus, in pity, touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight, and they followed him. The path to greatness is down. In the kingdom of Jesus, greatness is not found in power, recognition, or control, but in humility, servanthood, and compassion. There's 3 principles that I want to draw out today. All of these are going to be instructive principles, okay? Ultimately, all of these mirror our Savior Jesus. And ultimately, in all of this, we see more and more of Jesus, and we fall more and more in love with who he is, and we learn to worship him and to trust him and to surrender to him. But this passage is primarily an instructive passage. It's Jesus instructing his disciples of what it looks like to be great. And so the principles that I want to draw out, the points that I'm making from the sermon today, and there's 3 of them, are all going to be kind of framed in the instructive sense, all right? So number 1, what Jesus is teaching, number 1, learn to give up the spotlight. Number 1, the path to greatness, if you want to learn to channel your ambition in the way of God, you got to learn to give up the spotlight. I get this from the passage because in verse 17, what's interesting is right after where we left off last week in that parable that Jesus was giving and all the lessons that he had taught from it, it says Jesus began to move toward Jerusalem. Now what we know is, we're getting toward the very end of Matthew, and y'all know what happens at the end of Matthew, right? It's kind of like watching the movie Titanic. Like you know what happens at the end. And yet, in the middle of it, you're still intrigued by the narrative, and you should be. But you need to remember that as Matthew is informing you that he's moving toward Jerusalem, what do you know about the end of the story? Jerusalem is the place where Jesus lays down his life. He's moving toward the very place that he would fulfill his ultimate mission. Jesus didn't come primarily to be our teacher and our mentor. He came to be our Savior, to be our Redeemer. He came to lay down his life for us, to pay the penalty for our sin, to reconcile us with God, to be raised from the dead, that we might have the opportunity to have new life in him. That's Jesus' ultimate mission. And it says that Jesus lifts up from his teaching, and he's beginning to move toward that place where he would give himself. And as he's doing that, he's like bringing his disciples in. And we've seen this again and again in Matthew. Like he's helping them know, like, hey guys, this is why I'm going. Like, hey, we're going to Jerusalem, boys, and here's what's up. Like, we're not going there to just get good falafel and hummus. I'm not going there to just see my mom and my friends. I'm actually going there. You need to understand, like, how much this is going to cost. And he's been instructing them and helping them see this, although we know from the crucifixion narrative that they still didn't get it by the end. But he's been helping them see it. I'm going to be delivered over, he says, to the chief priests and the scribes. They're going to condemn me to death. I'll be delivered into the hands of the Gentiles. I'll be mocked. I'll be flogged. I'll be crucified. And then, after all of that, he says, I'll be raised to the third day, on the third day. Now, what's interesting is Jesus is describing all this to the group. And obviously, there's more than just the 12 disciples there, because the mom of two of the disciples are brothers. And the mom of two of the boys are there. And she's hearing this. And something that he says toward the end raises her attention. Oh, he's going to be raised on the third day. And she's getting the idea that he's going to be handed authority. Like, he's going to be handed over the kingdom of all things. Like, he's going to be lifted up, raised up to this great position with great power. And the mom comes up and she goes, excuse me, Jesus, could I just ask you something? And Jesus is like, sure, what is it? And what does she begin to ask? She says, well, Jesus, like when you're all raised up and everything, I'm speaking like a good Georgia mom, right? When you're all raised up and everything, I'm just wondering, could my two boys, could they maybe be on the right side and on the left side? I just think they'd be great at that. It just seems like they'd fit that role just well. Could you just exalt them too? Could you just make them really, really big and important? Okay? So James and John's mom, and don't you know, what were they sitting there going? Oh, yeah, you got to wonder, kind of like, were they like, oh, gee, mom, please, no? Or on the inside, were they like, that a girl? That's my mama, They asked to sit on the right and the left. These are positions of power. Okay? Here's what essentially she's asking. In today's language, we're talking about the VIP seats. Okay? We're talking about FedEx Forum. You got the gold pass hanging around your neck. We're talking about places of recognition. For a king, the right hand, that most important kind of position, and the left hand. I mean, these are exalted places, places of honor, places of influence. And y'all know, you live in the systems. Whatever you do, you live in the systems. We live in a culture where greatness is often looking like this, where we hear about a friend that's getting promoted, and we say to our friend, hey, when you get promoted, don't forget me. Hey, throw a little my way too. Maybe you could raise me up. Don't you know that every president that gets elected, all the people suddenly around them, they're starting to ask stuff of him. They're trying to ride his coattails in. This is the world we live in. We are obsessed with platforms. How can we get ourselves a little bit higher? How can we get ourselves to more privilege? How do we get ourselves to a position where we have more power, where we have less need? How do we get ourselves to a place where more people know us and we're more influential? James and John's mom is just expressing what's in most of our hearts. We're just too ashamed to admit it. And the boys might have rolled their eyes, but deep down in their hearts, I know them because I know me. I bet there's part of them, maybe a lot of them, that was like, I hope he says yes. What's interesting about the passage is when you go down to verse 24, it actually says that the other 10 hearing it became indignant. In other words, they're quite frustrated. They're like, can you believe she asked that? But let me tell you, they get mad, I don't think because the request itself, but because they want the same thing. They might have had their mamas there too and go, why didn't you speak up first, Mom? And this little competition, this kind of jealousy is starting to break out among the disciples. And they're all going, oh, well, how come she got to ask that? How come these two would get to be in that position? And they're all kind of jockeying to be at the right hand and to the left. And they're starting to try to outrank others. And they're just falling in line with exactly the way the world and the world systems works. And this is why Jesus says what he says, verse 22. He says, when she asked this, you do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? Here's what Jesus is doing. He's gently redirecting. He's basically saying, I'm not sure that you understand. Like, you're wanting your life to count. Like, I hear behind your question, you're wanting to be great. But do you understand the path of greatness? Like, it's going to cost more than you will ever understand. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? And my head and my heart goes to the garden, right? The Garden of Gethsemane, where we know Jesus there, abandoned, all alone, on his face, sweat pouring out of his body, so much that it became blood. Facing the moment that he would have to give his very life for us. The call to greatness on his life required his life. Father, if it's possible, could this cup pass from me? Yet, Father, it's not about what I want, it's about what you want. Do you know Jesus is seeing into the future of what it's going to cost? Do you know? Are you able to drink from this cup? You're saying you want this, but do you know the path? See, friends, greatness does not come through getting ahead, but rather greatness comes from giving yourself. That's what Jesus is teaching. You want to be great? Jesus is trying to redefine. He's like, you're sitting here asking to get ahead. You're sitting here asking for James and John to kind of be put at the front. You're aspiring to the wrong thing. No. Like, if you want to be great, you got to stop that. You got to just stop all of that. It's not about getting ahead. It's about giving of yourself. That's what greatness looks like. Our culture, friends, teaches us to build platforms, and Jesus teaches us to lay those platforms down. It says in Philippians 2 that even though equality with God was something that he could have held on to, that he didn't grasp that, he didn't hold on to that, but rather he emptied himself. Though he had the platform, he laid it down. And it says he took on the form of a servant. That's what greatness looks like, laying your life down, laying your platform down. And he says in verse 23, he said to them, you will drink of my cup. In other words, following me is going to involve this laying down. It's going to involve you following me into suffering. It's going to involve the very opposite thing of the world says, which is going up to the right. No, following me is going to be divesting yourself of things of the world and investing yourself in the lives of other people for their sake and not your own. You will drink my cup, but, he says, to sit at my right hand and my left, that's not mine to grant, but it's for whom the Father has prepared. In other words, he's going, guys, stop that. That should not be your concern right now. That's something God does. Like, let your aspiration just be eyes toward God. Don't let it be eyes toward anyone else. Like, what is going on, guys? Why are you aspiring to the wrong things? Just humble yourself. Greatness does not come through getting attention. Greatness comes in self-forgetfulness. True greatness is not spotlight seeking, but it's self-giving. Why are you so obsessed with people seeing you and seeing what you're doing? Why are you trying to become somebody and to be seen as somebody? Why is that even in your thought of where you'll sit? Just give yourself. Philippians 2, the passage that I referenced earlier about Jesus, starts out in verse 3 by saying, do nothing from selfish ambition. Do nothing from conceit. Oh my word. How many of us are ruled by selfish ambition and conceit? At least one hand, thank you. All of us, right? At some time or another, like it's possible for all of us. But Jesus says, do nothing from selfish ambition. Do nothing from that kind of self-centeredness and conceit. Rather, in humility, count others as more significant than yourself. Want to be great? The path is down. You want to be great? Think less of yourself. Think more of others. You want to be great? Humble yourself. Give yourself away. Jesus says in another place in Luke 14, verse 11, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted. Humility. True greatness is found in humility. It's not spotlight seeking, it's self-giving. So I ask, where in your life are you craving credit and visibility right now? Where is it right now in this season that you just want somebody to pay attention and you want somebody to kind of lift you up? And then I follow it with the question, in a world of spotlight chasers, and we live in a world of spotlight chasers, would you be willing to listen to Jesus and learn in greater degrees to give that up? Would you be willing to just move into a posture to where it really does not matter who sees you, except for one, and that's God? Can you serve this week in a way that nobody sees but God himself? That's the question. Is it possible to learn to serve in such a way? Jesus invites us to a different path. And for some of us, I was watching yesterday. I'm going to brag on him. He's going to be awkward about it. But I was over at Tad's house yesterday. We went to visit their new baby, William. And I sat there and watched Tad. And Tad is so skilled and so talented. And he could chase so many things. But I've watched Tad over this last season intentionally divest himself of things that he could pursue in the world to invest himself more in quiet, humble things that many in the world don't recognize, but that are great in the ways of God. And I watched him yesterday as a new dad in his house. William was flatulating, I don't know another way to say it. And Tad smelled what was happening and was like, hey, I think we would all be happier if I go change his diaper, you know? And I watched this dad here on Father's Day. We're celebrating dads. And I know it's not just Tad. It's all of our dads. You are wonderful and great. But I watched this guy who's just happy, literally, was like bebopping out of the room to go change his son's dirty diaper. And I thought, that's true greatness, is it not? True greatness as a man is not chasing promotions. Nothing wrong with a promotion. But true greatness is a man who is not chasing promotions, but is looking for ways to serve, even to serve to that extent. That's true greatness. True greatness is obscurity rather than seeking applause. And so in a world of spotlight chasers, will we learn to give it up? Number one, the principle, learn to give up the spotlight. Number two, you ready? The second instructive principle is this: choose the towel, not the throne. Right? The second principle is choose the towel, not the throne. If you want to be great, you got to learn to give up the spotlight. You got to choose humility. That's the first principle. You've got to let God work humility into your heart. But the second thing is you got to choose the towel and not the throne. Here's what I mean. Jesus is actually, as we continue the passage, he's contrasting the world's version of greatness, which is control and hierarchy. And my, oh my, you look around at the world today, and there's no shortage of people who are in power, whether it's in this city, whether it's in your workplace, whether it's in our neighborhood boards, whether it's in boardrooms in your corporations, whether it's in the national or global stage. There are no shortage of people who are in power who end up using that power for hierarchy and control. And Jesus says, look around. You're not going to find any shortage of that. But I'm here to restore things to the way it should be from the beginning. And the way you see it around you is not the way it was supposed to be from the beginning. And I'm here to change your heart. And for us as a movement, a community of people who are now defined by Jesus, it's going to be different. And he speaks to this. And he says he called them over. So mom has just finished asking, and he's said what he said. And he calls them over in verse 25. And he says, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles, they lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Look around. He's saying you see people who don't walk with the Lord, and when they get in positions of power, they're all about using that power for themselves. And they gain off of it, whether it's through money or just through benefit or privileges, whether it's through oppressing other people, whether it's whatever it is, they're using that power for their own advantages. But the key phrase here is in verse 26. And he looks at his disciples in the eyes, as I'm looking you in the eyes, and he says, it will not be this way among us. This is a revolution. Without this work of God in our hearts, we would be left, when we have power and we have privilege, to be self-centered with it. And Jesus says, I have come to change you. It will not be this way. And then he goes on to say, but whoever would be great among you must be your what? Servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is amazing. Because essentially here's what's happening. In this moment, the true king, the King of Kings, the one who has all power, all privilege, the greatest position, in this moment, the King of Kings is saying, I came to serve you. It's unbelievable. The greatest is the one who goes lowest. The greatest is the one who serves. And as Jesus is teaching, what's so interesting about this teaching is he's not just teaching a principle, he's actually pointing to a person, and he's pointing to himself. Essentially what's happening is here he is, the King of glory, the one who has everything. And he's saying, here I am, the true God, the eternal God, the one who was and who is to come, life himself. Here I am, the King of Kings, who has everything in my advantage. And what have I done among you? This verse is a verse that you should memorize if you haven't already. He says, I came not to be served, but to serve. And to give my life, not to give my chump change. Elon Musk, he could give $500 million to the city of Memphis at this moment, and he wouldn't feel it. Because he has so much money, all right? This is not someone with Jesus, someone with great power and resources just giving chump change. He's saying, no, I came not to be served, but to serve. And I'm not just throwing money at it like a little charity or a foundation to help me avoid taxes. Jesus is saying, no, what I'm going to give to show you how much I am committed to serve out of my own greatness, I'm going to give you my life. There's no greater love that we could ever know than one would give his life for us. In the true kingdom, here's the principle. In the true kingdom, status is not about being served. It's about stooping low to lift others up. And here's what it means. When you want to follow Jesus, for all of us who are committed to him, it looks like picking up a towel and not sitting on a throne. The world asks, what does a person own? But Christ asks, how does a person serve? What makes you great is not what you own, but it's how you serve. And Jesus is redefining greatness, not as how many people serve you, but rather how deeply you're willing to serve other people. But what I love is that Jesus is not just telling us about this, but he's showing us this with his very life. In my head and in my heart, I go to another gospel that we're not studying in this series, the Gospel of John, and I think about chapter 13. Many of you guys know the story of Jesus when he was with his disciples. Right before he was crucified, he had a meal with them. What's interesting is they get in the meal, and Jesus knows, it says in verse 3, he knows that God's given everything to his hands, that he had come from God, and that he was going back to God, which is very interesting. In other words, he's got great freedom. He knows that the stuff of this world can't be held onto, right? What you're going to do, like shove your academic degrees into your casket one day? Are you going to like put all of that on your gravestone like as something to be like really proud of? Like, are you going to drag a U-Haul of all the things that you've acquired in this world behind a hearse? Like, in the end, what does that stuff matter? Jesus knows he's come from God and he's going to God. In the end, he can't take stuff with him. What matters then in this world? And he demonstrates it. He rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments. And this is where I'm getting the main point from. Take up a towel and not a throne, right? Because Jesus took up a towel and he tied it around his waist. And then he began to pour water into a basin and he began to wash the disciples' feet. And he began to wipe them with the towel that was around them. Now, this was the lowliest position. Their feet were stinky in this time. Everybody wore sandals and chacos and all the things. And there wasn't pavement, and there was a lot of poop from animals all around. And they would walk through these really dirty streets, and their feet would be disgusting. And the position that was like the lowliest position, was the one that like was your starter position that nobody really wanted, and as soon as you could get out of it, you tried, was the position of washing feet. And yet Jesus stands up and he begins to take off his outer garment, he puts on a towel, and he begins to stoop, and he actually becomes the one that washes the disciples' feet. Well, in verse 6, it says that Peter is like, heck no, you can't do that. Like, who are you? No. You are my Lord. Like, you're the greatest among us, Jesus. You cannot wash my feet. And yet Jesus answered him, what I'm doing you don't understand now, but afterward you'll understand. If you go down to verse 12 in that passage, it says, after he had washed feet, he put on his outer garments, he resumed his place, and he says, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher, and you call me Lord, and that's right, for so I am. In other words, you're calling me great, and you're right. But he says in verse 14, this is a teaching moment, if I, the greatest in the room, your teacher and your Lord, have washed your feet, have done the lowliest thing, so you, my disciples, ought to do the lowliest thing for one another. You ought to be the one that stands up first to volunteer for the hardest thing. It stands up first to do the thing that requires the most selfless service for others. You wash others' feet. For I've given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you. Truly, a servant is not greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. I'm overwhelmed that this is our God. A lot of people have wrong ideas about God, and it keeps a lot of people away from him. But this is the truest picture of our God. A God who is great and glorious and holy, deserving of honor, but a God who in love for us, broken, messed up us, in his greatness, because of his love for us, would show us such grace, would take on such humility that he would serve us. I would imagine that most of you in this room, if he came to serve your feet, you would go, please don't take off my socks. You would have a hard time with the God of the universe. Holy and awesome as he, knowing yourself and knowing him, you would have a hard time for him to stoop and serve you. And yet that is why he came. Not to be served by you, but to serve you because of your need. He doesn't need anything from you. You need something from him, and in his grace, he came to give it. He came to give what you need out of the love that he has for you. This is the God that we follow. And friends, if you have received grace because of this God, Jesus Christ, who we follow, then friends, this is the kind of greatness that we pursue. Amen? If our God would come in this posture toward us, how could we do anything else but come with that posture toward others? I don't care what your position is. I don't care what your pay is. I don't care how much privilege you have, where you live, what your education is, how much is in your bank account. For us as followers of Jesus, how could we do anything but be known as the chief servants of all? Because we have been transformed by one who has served us. Tim Keller said, Jesus gave up the throne of heaven to pick up a towel, and he calls us to do the same. So I ask, where is Jesus calling you to put down the pursuit of status and to pick up the towel? I don't care if it's not your job to do it. Since when have we decided not to serve because it's not our job? Quote unquote. I don't care if we're paid to do it. Since when have we been a people that only do what's right because we're paid to do it? It doesn't matter how much it costs, personally, professionally, relationally, emotionally, physically. Like, we are people who serve. We sacrifice of ourselves because we have been served by Jesus. Because he gave himself for us, we freely give ourselves to others. Where is it that we need to take up the towel? And what would it look like in your context? What does a towel look like in your neighborhood? What does a towel look like in your campus? What does a towel look like in your workplace? What would the towel look like in your family, in your friend group? How can we pick up the towel? And where might Jesus be inviting us to kneel and not to climb? The path to greatness is down. And Jesus says, it will not be the way of the world among you. I've come to restore you to the way of God, and the way of God is learning to go lower. It's learning to serve more deeply. The third and final point as we close is to be interruptible with compassion. To be interruptible with compassion. And I say this because as the passage closes, and the reason I included the little story about these beggars on the side of the road in this sermon today is because it's not divorced. You've got to see all of this in context. Jesus doesn't want to just teach his disciples these things, but he wants to show these things lived out. He's just told them to give up the spotlight. He's just told them to pick up the towel and not the throne. And as they begin their journey toward Jerusalem, right? Jesus is on mission. As they go out of Jericho, a great crowd is there, and we read in verse 29 that these two blind men are sitting by the side of the road and they're crying out, "Lord, have mercy, have mercy." And in verse 31, we read that the crowd tries to say, "Shut up, you guys, shut up." And they keep crying out, "Lord, have mercy," even louder. And then Jesus stops. What do you want me to do for you? What I find so fascinating is that here Jesus is. He's on mission. How many of y'all live busy lives? Please be honest. How many of y'all feel like you don't have time in your day for somebody to interrupt you? Right? From the time we wake up, we got things to do, people to see, tasks to complete, and then we're just glad to get home and watch Netflix and go to bed, all right? Whatever it is. And we just live our life from start to finish sometimes on just full go mode. And Jesus has every right to be on full go mode. He's moving toward Jerusalem. I got to tell you, his mission is probably at this moment more important than any other mission you've had in any of your days. Would you agree? He's going to pay the price for the redemption of the world. I would say it's kind of an important task that he needs to complete. Would you agree? And he's moving toward Jerusalem. But here he is on mission, walking to his death. And what does he do? He stops. He stops for two blind men on the side of the road. The crowd has tried to silence them, but Jesus hears them, and he has compassion on them. Here's the principle I'll put on the screen. Greatness is about seeing people with mercy. Greatness is about seeing people with mercy. Greatness in God's eyes is often found in the small, the overlooked, the inconvenient. Rich Villodas says, if you want to find Jesus, look for the person that no one else is stopping for. Do you hear the cries here in Memphis? Do you hear the cries of the children? Do you hear the cries of the neighborhoods? Do you hear the cries for justice, for help? Do you hear the cries, maybe silent, of some of your classmates, coworkers, neighbors, who are so lonely, who are so hopeless? Do you hear the cries of people around the world? Do you hear their cries? Jesus hears, and he invites us to hear. Compassion is the fruit of a heart that's not in a hurry. And he has compassion. He does. And in stopping to see them, he's exemplifying the very principles that he just taught them. On mission, yet not too busy. He's not going to overlook those who have need. This is true greatness. Who are the people in your life that you're too busy to see? Who are the people that are crying out that you need to stop to serve? And will you choose to slow down, to stop, and to be like Jesus? True greatness is being interruptible with compassion. I close the sermon this morning by just reminding you of the key verse. But the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And I just want to say as I close, just a brief gospel moment. Jesus is not just giving us a model here. He's not just saying, all right, guys, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, and we got to make this happen. You got to redirect your own life, and you got to figure this out on yourself. No, because what's needed is a new heart. These things don't just happen apart from God transforming your heart. What you need here is a whole new way of life. And you just need to remember, the reason I called that verse the key verse is because Jesus gave up the highest throne for the lowest place so that we could be lifted up with him. And now he calls us to follow in his steps. Not to earn greatness, but because he's already given us his. All that we could ever want and need. By his service and sacrifice of himself, he has provided. So in the kingdom of Jesus, greatness is not found in power, recognition, or control, but in humility, servanthood, and compassion. And I pray for all of us that these three things would be growing increasingly in our life as we trust and follow him.